I never thought my wedding day would be the day my entire world exploded into a million pieces. But there I was, standing in the grand ballroom of the Ashford estate, wearing a dress that cost more than my mother earned in 6 months, watching my new father-in-law point his fat finger directly at my mum and say loud enough for all 400 guests to hear, "That's not a mother. That's trash." The room went so quiet you could hear the ice melting in people's champagne glasses. And then Trevor, my husband of exactly 47 minutes, laughed. Not a nervous laugh, not an uncomfortable chuckle. A real, genuine laugh that said he agreed with every hateful word. That moment felt like falling through ice. You know it's happening, but your brain can't quite process it fast enough to save you. I stood there in my beautiful white gown with its hand-sewn pearls, and I watched my mother's face. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just sat there at her lonely table near the kitchen doors, hands folded in her lap like she was waiting for a bus. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up to where this nightmare really started. 3 days before the wedding, I was standing on a platform in the bridal boutique downtown, getting my final dress fitting. Mum sat on the ivory couch near the mirror, her purse clutched in her lap like always. She wore her church dress, the grey one, with the small flowers that she'd owned for at least 5 years. Her shoes were polished but old. Her hair was pulled back in a simple bun. Constance Ashford, my future mother-in-law, sat on the opposite couch. She wore a cream-coloured suit that probably cost $3,000. Her pearls were real. Her hair was done at a salon that charged more for a single appointment than Mum spent on groceries in a month. "The dress looks lovely, Zoe," Constance said, her voice dripping with that fake sweetness rich people use when they're about to say something mean. "Though I do hope you've been following the diet plan I sent you. We want you to look your absolute best in the photos." I forced a smile. I'd lost 12 pounds trying to meet her impossible standards. Then Constance turned to my mother. "Diana, dear, have you sorted out what you'll be wearing to the wedding?" Mum nodded quietly. "Yes, I found a nice dress at. Because I'd be happy to lend you something." Constance interrupted, her eyes scanning Mum from head to toe like she was inspecting a used car. "We want everyone in the family photos to look cohesive, polished. You understand?" The word polished hung in the air like a slap. My mother's cheeks turned pink, but she kept her voice steady. "That's very kind, but I have something appropriate." "Well," Constance sniffed, "if you're certain. Though you might want to do something about your hair. My stylist could fit you in. As a gift, of course." I watched my mum's hands tighten around her purse. She'd worked as a cafeteria lady and a house cleaner my entire life. She'd raised me alone after my dad left when I was 2. She'd packed my lunches in brown paper bags, while other kids had expensive lunch boxes. She'd sewn patches on my jeans instead of buying new ones, and she'd done it all without ever complaining. Without ever making me feel like we were poor. But sitting there in that boutique with its crystal chandeliers and champagne on silver trays, I felt ashamed, and I hated myself for feeling that way. That evening, I told Trevor about the incident while we ate takeout in his apartment. Well, not his apartment, it was a penthouse his parents bought him. I lived in a studio across town that I could barely afford. "Babe, you're overreacting," Trevor said, scrolling through his phone while he talked. "Mum's just particular about aesthetics. You know how important this wedding is to her. She sits on the boards of like 6 charities. Everyone who's anyone will be there. She basically called my mum poor and ugly. She offered to help. That's nice." "It wasn't nice, Trevor. It was insulting." He finally looked up from his phone, and I saw a flash of irritation cross his face. "Look, I love you, okay? But you have to understand my family has certain standards. They're not trying to be mean. They just want everything to be perfect." I wanted to argue more, but I was so tired. Tired of wedding planning. Tired of trying to fit into his world. Tired of feeling like I had to apologize for where I came from. "Fine," I said quietly. "Whatever." He kissed my forehead like I was a child who'd finally stopped throwing a tantrum. "That's my girl. Trust me. After the wedding, everything will be easier." 2 days later was the rehearsal dinner. The Ashfords had rented out their country club, the kind of place where you needed 3 recommendation letters just to apply for membership. 80 people were invited to this intimate gathering. Mom arrived in her navy dress. I could tell she'd spent hours getting ready. Her hair was curled. Her makeup was careful. She looked beautiful to me. But when she walked into that dining room full of women in designer gowns and men in custom suits, she might as well have been invisible. I watched Constance's friends whisper and stare. I saw the way they looked at my mother and then looked at me, like they were trying to figure out how Trevor had ended up with someone so beneath him. During dinner, Richard Ashford, Trevor's father, stood up to make a toast. He was a big man with a red face and a voice that filled rooms. "To my son, Trevor," he boomed, raising his glass. "You've made the Ashford family proud in every way. Your grandfather built this family's name from nothing, and you're carrying on that legacy. We're grateful for the strong foundation the Ashford family has given you, the education, the opportunities, the values." He went on and on about the Ashford family. He never once mentioned me. He definitely didn't mention my mother. Under the table, Trevor squeezed my hand. But he didn't say anything. He didn't stand up and mention my family. He just sat there, letting his father erase me. After dinner, I went to the bathroom to splash cold water on my face. My best friend Nina found me there, my hands shaking as I gripped the marble sink. "You okay?" she asked, locking the door behind her. "I don't know if I can do this, Nina." "Then don't." She said it so simply, like cancelling a wedding was as easy as cancelling a dentist appointment. "Zoe, I've been your friend since college. I've watched you change over the past year. You're not yourself anymore. You're trying to be whatever they want you to be. We've already paid the deposits. People are flying in from all over. My mum saved for months to buy her dress and—" I stopped talking because I heard voices in the hallway. Constance's voice. "I told Trevor this was a mistake," she was saying to someone. "That woman raised her daughter in absolute squalor. Did you see her hands? Those are working hands. And the way she talks, no refinement at all. Imagine what the grandchildren will be like." Nina grabbed my arm, her eyes furious. "We need to leave, right now," but I couldn't move. I just stood there, frozen, while Trevor's mother talked about my mom like she was some kind of contamination in their perfect bloodline. Nina drove me home that night. I didn't tell Trevor what I'd heard. I just lay in my bed, staring at the ceiling, telling myself it would all be fine once we were actually married. Once I was officially part of their family, they'd have to accept me, accept us. I was so wrong. I didn't sleep at all that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Constance's voice saying the word squalor, like it tasted bad in her mouth. When my alarm went off at 6 in the morning, I felt like I'd been hit by a truck, but it was my wedding day, so I dragged myself out of bed and tried to feel excited. This was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, right? Nina picked me up at 7 to drive me to the hotel where we'd be getting ready. The bridal suite was massive, all white furniture and gold mirrors and windows overlooking the city. There were mimosas and pastries laid out on a table. My dress hung in the corner, looking like something from a fairy tale. "Your mum texted," Nina said, checking her phone. "She's on her way. She wants to see you before the hair and makeup people arrive." That made me smile for the first time all morning. Mum always knew when I needed her. She arrived 20 minutes later, carrying a small wrapped box with a silver ribbon. She looked tired too, and I wondered if she'd slept any better than I had. "Hi, baby," she said, pulling me into one of her warm hugs that smelled like her lavender hand cream. "I brought you something. It was my mother's, and I wanted you to have it for today." Before she could give me the box, the door burst open. Constance swept in wearing a pale pink dress that probably cost more than a car. Behind her came a team of stylists carrying cases of hair tools and makeup. "Good morning, bride," Constance sang out in that fake, cheerful voice. She air-kissed both my cheeks, leaving the scent of her expensive perfume. Then she noticed my mother. "Oh, Diana, you're here early. I wanted to spend some time with Zoe before things got busy," Mom said quietly. How sweet. Constance positioned herself directly between us, physically blocking Mom from getting closer to me. "But we really need to get started. The photographer will be here in 90 minutes, and Zoe's hair alone will take at least an hour. Diana, perhaps you could go get ready yourself? I'm sure you'll need plenty of time." The insult was barely hidden. Mum's smile got smaller, but she nodded. Of course. I'll see you at the church, sweetheart. She set the wrapped box on the table and left. I wanted to call her back, to tell Constance to stop being so rude, but the stylists were already pushing me into a chair and putting a cape around my shoulders. The next 2 hours were a blur of curling irons and lipstick and Constance's running commentary on everything. My eyebrows were too thick. My skin would look washed out in photos. Did I remember to get that mole on my shoulder checked? It might be cancerous. By the time I stepped into my dress, I felt like a doll being prepared for display, not a bride about to marry someone I loved. The ceremony was at Holy Trinity Cathedral, this massive church with stained glass windows and marble columns. Trevor's family had been getting married there for 4 generations. When I walked in for the rehearsal the day before, I'd felt so small and out of place. Now, standing at the back of the church in my wedding dress, I felt even worse. Through the doorway, I could see the guests arriving. Trevor's side of the church was filling up quickly, women in elegant dresses, men in expensive suits, everyone air-kissing and shaking hands like this was a business conference instead of a wedding. My side of the church was nearly empty. I'd invited my co-workers, some friends from college, a few neighbours, maybe 30 people total, and my mum, sitting by herself in the front row, looking small and alone in that huge church. "Ready?" Nina asked. She looked beautiful in her lavender bridesmaid dress, but her eyes were worried. "It's not too late to run. I have my car right outside." I forced a laugh. "Stop it. I'm fine." "Zoe, I'm fine," I said more firmly. The music started. Nina walked down the aisle first. Then it was my turn. I didn't have anyone to walk me down the aisle. My dad had left when I was too young to remember him, and I'd never wanted some random uncle or family friend to do it instead. So I walked alone, holding a bouquet of white roses that cost $800. As I moved down that long aisle, I looked at the faces watching me. Trevor's family and friends stared with polite smiles that didn't reach their eyes. They were judging me, measuring me, wondering if I was good enough. Then I saw my mum. She was crying happy tears, her hands pressed to her heart. To her, I was perfect. I was everything. I almost turned around right then, but Trevor was waiting at the altar, in his tuxedo, looking handsome and nervous. When I reached him, he took my hands and whispered, "You look incredible." Maybe it would be okay. Maybe once we were married, his family would warm up to me. Maybe I was worrying over nothing. The ceremony felt mechanical. The priest talked about love and commitment, but his words just floated past me. I said, "I do," when I was supposed to. Trevor said, "I do." We kissed. People clapped. And just like that, I was married. The reception was at the Ashford estate, their massive property outside the city. The ballroom could hold 500 people. There were ice sculptures and a live band, and flowers everywhere, thousands of dollars worth of flowers. During the cocktail hour, I kept looking for my mum, but I couldn't find her. Trevor was busy talking to his college friends by the bar. I started walking over to join them when I heard Trevor's voice rising above the others. I know, he was saying, laughing. But she's different when it's just us. Trust me." His best friend, a guy named Kyle who'd never liked me, said something I couldn't quite hear. Trevor laughed again. "At least she's pretty enough to look at, right?" My dad said. "As long as the kids turn out okay, it's fine." The kids turn out okay. Like I was some kind of genetic risk. I stood there frozen behind a column, my wedding dress suddenly feeling too tight. "Trevor," Kyle said, sounding nervous. Several of the guys had noticed me standing there. Trevor turned and his face went white. Then he recovered quickly, walking over with a big smile and kissing my cheek. "Hey, babe. We were just having some guy talk. You look amazing." "What did you mean about the kids?" I asked quietly. "Nothing. Just joking around. You know how guys are." He pulled me close, but I felt stiff in his arms. "Come on. Don't be upset on our wedding day." Before I could respond, someone announced that dinner was being served. That's when I noticed the seating chart. I'd worked on that chart for weeks, making sure my mum had a good seat. I'd put her at the head table, right next to me. But someone had changed it. My mum was seated at table 18. In the back corner, near the kitchen doors. Trevor, what happened to the seating chart? I demanded. He looked uncomfortable. Mum thought we needed room for the ambassador and his wife. They're very important donors to her charity. Your mum said she didn't mind moving. You didn't even ask me. Zoe, please. Not now. Everyone's watching. Nina appeared at my elbow. Your mum just went to the bathroom. She looked upset. My heart dropped. I rushed through the crowded ballroom, my dress catching on chairs and bumping into guests. I found Mum in the hallway outside the bathrooms, wiping her eyes with a tissue. Mum, what happened? She shook her head quickly. Nothing, sweetheart. Nothing at all. Tell me. It's your wedding day. I'm not going to ruin it with... Mother, please. She took a shaky breath. Constance's sister cornered me earlier. She asked if I was hired help. When I said I was the bride's mother, she looked so shocked. She said she'd thought you were, that Trevor had. Mum couldn't finish. She didn't need to. Trevor's aunt had assumed I was adopted, or that my real mother was someone else, someone more appropriate. I pulled my mother into a hug, feeling her shake against me. I'm so sorry, I whispered. Don't be sorry. You have nothing to be sorry for. But I did. I was sorry for bringing her into this world of cruel, heartless people. I was sorry for caring more about avoiding embarrassment than protecting her. I was sorry for everything. The DJ's voice echoed through the hallway. Ladies and gentlemen, please return to your seats for the toasts. Mom pulled away, wiping her eyes. We should go back. We walked back into the ballroom together. I sat at the head table next to Trevor. Mom went to her table in the corner. The lights dimmed. A spotlight hit the microphone. And Richard Ashford stood up, his face already red from whiskey, holding the microphone like a weapon. My heart started pounding. This was it. I could feel it. Something terrible was about to happen. Richard Ashford adjusted his tie and cleared his throat into the microphone. The feedback made people wince, but he didn't seem to notice or care. His face was flushed, and I could tell from the way he swayed slightly that he'd had too much to drink. Ladies and gentlemen, he boomed, his voice filling every corner of the ballroom. It's time to talk about my son. Polite applause rippled through the crowd. Trevor sat up straighter beside me, smiling. He loved when his father praised him. Trevor James Ashford, Richard continued, has made me proud every single day of his life. From the moment he was born, I knew he was destined for greatness. He went to the right schools, made the right connections, built the right career. I noticed he kept saying the right over and over. The right schools, the right connections, the right everything. The Ashford family has a legacy in this city, Richard went on, his chest puffing out. My grandfather started with nothing and built an empire. My father expanded it. I've doubled it. And Trevor, my brilliant son, will take it even further. More applause. I smiled because that's what I was supposed to do, but my stomach was twisting into knots. Now, when Trevor told us he was getting married, we were thrilled, Richard said. His tone shifted slightly, and I felt Trevor's hand tighten around mine under the table. Of course, we all know Trevor could have chosen someone from his own world, someone whose family background was more established. The room got quieter. A few people shifted in their seats. Someone whose family tree includes more than just... Richard paused, pretending to search for the right word, but I could tell he knew exactly what he was going to say. Hardship. A few people let out uncomfortable laughs. I felt my face burning. Beside Richard, Constance stood up. She was smiling, but it was the kind of smile a snake might make, if snakes could smile. She took the microphone from her husband. What Richard is trying to say, she said in her smooth, practiced voice, is that we believe in charity. We believe in giving opportunities to those less fortunate. My breath caught in my throat. She was talking about me like I was one of her charity cases. When we first met Zoe, we saw potential, Constance continued. Yes, her background was humble, very humble. But we thought, with the right guidance, with the right influences, she could be molded into someone appropriate for our family. I wanted to stand up. I wanted to scream. But I was frozen, my hand trapped under Trevor's grip. And her mother, Constance said, her eyes scanning the room until they landed on my mom sitting at her table in the back. Well, we were certainly surprised when we first met Diana. People were turning to look at my mother now. She sat perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap, her face expressionless. Trevor tried to warn us, Constance said with a little laugh. He said his future mother-in-law was very simple. But seeing her in person was quite shocking. My whole body went cold. Nina, sitting at the bridesmaid table, looked like she was about to leap across the room. Richard grabbed the microphone back from his wife. He was swaying more now, his words starting to slur slightly. "Let's just be honest here," he said, his voice getting louder. "Let's stop pretending. Everyone in this room can see what's obvious." "No," I thought. "Please don't. Look at that woman back there," Richard said, pointing directly at my mother with his free hand. "That's not a mother. That's trash." The word echoed through the ballroom like a gunshot. "She cleaned toilets for a living," Richard continued, laughing at his own cruelty. "She worked in a cafeteria scooping mystery meat onto trays, and now she's supposed to be the grandmother of Ashford children? It's absurd." Some people gasped. Others looked away, embarrassed. But several of Trevor's college friends, the ones who'd never thought I was good enough, started laughing. And then Trevor laughed too. Not a nervous chuckle. Not a sound of discomfort. A real, genuine laugh that said he agreed with every horrible word his father had just said. That laugh broke something inside me. Something that couldn't be fixed. I felt my chair scrape backward as I stood up. The sound was loud in the silent ballroom. My legs were shaking, but I stayed standing. Richard stopped mid-sentence, surprised. Constance's smile faltered. Trevor's laugh died in his throat. I walked toward the microphone. My dress felt heavy, dragging behind me. My veil slipped sideways, but I didn't fix it. I didn't care anymore. "Excuse me," I said quietly, reaching for the microphone. Richard was so shocked he just handed it to me. I looked out at 400 faces staring at me. 400 people who'd just watched my mother be humiliated, who'd laughed or looked away or done nothing. My voice came out steady and clear. "This wedding is over." You could have heard a pin drop. Trevor jumped to his feet. "Zoe, wait." "No," I cut him off. The microphone made my voice powerful, filling the room. "I will not marry a man who laughs while his family calls my mother trash." "It was just a joke," Trevor said, his face going red. "You're overreacting." "A joke?" I turned to look at him. "You think degrading my mother in front of 400 people is funny?" She. It wasn't like that. "You laughed, Trevor. I heard you. Everyone heard you." Constance found her voice. "Young lady, do you have any idea how embarrassing this is? Do you know how much money we've spent?" "I don't care about your money," the words burst out of me. "I don't care about your connections or your country club or your perfect Ashford legacy. My mother worked 3 jobs to raise me. She sacrificed everything to give me opportunities. She has more dignity in her little finger than your entire family combined." Richard's face was purple now. "You ungrateful little." "This wedding is cancelled," I said again, my voice stronger. "Everyone can leave. Go home. It's over." Chaos erupted. People started talking all at once. Constance was shrieking something about deposits and catering and embarrassment. Richard was yelling. Trevor's friends were pulling out their phones to record this disaster. Trevor grabbed my arm hard enough to hurt. "You can't do this. You're being ridiculous." So my dad had a few drinks and said some stupid things. "It doesn't mean anything." Nina appeared out of nowhere, pulling Trevor's hand off my arm. "Don't touch her. Stay out of this," Trevor snarled. "I'm exactly in this," Nina shot back. "I've been watching you and your horrible family treat my best friend like garbage for months. She's done. We're leaving." I pulled my arm free and started walking toward my mother's table. People moved out of my way like I was radioactive. Some were recording on their phones. Others were whispering. I didn't care about any of them. My mother stood up as I approached. Her face was calm, but I could see something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Something that looked almost like pride. "Mom, I'm so sorry," I said, my voice breaking. "I should have stopped them earlier. I should have—" "Zoe," she said quietly, taking both my hands in hers. "Sweetheart, before we leave, I need to tell you something. We can talk in the car. Let's just get out of here. No. Her voice was firm now, stronger than I'd ever heard it. I need to tell you right now, in front of all these people. I stared at her, confused. She looked past me at the crowd of people watching us, at the Ashfords standing by the head table, at the 400 guests who'd just witnessed the worst moment of my life. And then my mother said words that made absolutely no sense. Zoe, I need you to know something. My name isn't Diana Bennett. She paused, and her whole posture changed. Her shoulders straightened, her chin lifted, her voice filled with authority. My real name is Diana Castellano, and I'm a billionaire. The ballroom went completely silent, not the uncomfortable silence from before. This was different. This was the sound of 400 people collectively holding their breath. I stared at my mother. What? She looked at me with gentle eyes, but there was something different about her now. She stood taller. Her voice was stronger. Even her face looked different, somehow more confident, more powerful. My full name is Diana Castellano, she repeated, loud enough for everyone to hear. I'm the founder and majority shareholder of Castellano Global Industries. Someone in the crowd gasped. I heard phones being pulled out. People started whispering frantically. I knew that name. Everyone knew that name. Castellano Global Industries was one of the biggest multinational corporations in the world. They owned everything real estate, technology, manufacturing, media. The company was worth something like $40 billion. That's impossible, I whispered. But even as I said it, things started clicking into place. The way Mum always seemed calm no matter what happened. The way she never seemed worried about money even though we lived so simply. The way she'd sometimes disappear for a few days when I was growing up, saying she had work commitments. Richard Ashford's voice cut through the whispers. That's ridiculous. If you were Diana Castellano, you'd be one of the richest women in the world. You're a cafeteria worker. My mother turned to face him. When she spoke, her voice was ice cold. I was never a cafeteria worker, Richard, though I did observe cafeteria operations at several of my food service subsidiaries over the years. She walked toward the center of the room, and people actually moved out of her way. She didn't shuffle or apologize for taking up space anymore. She moved like someone who owned the ground she walked on. 28 years ago, Mum said, her voice carrying to every corner of the ballroom. I was a young entrepreneur who'd just built a successful tech startup. I sold it for my first $100 million. Then I fell in love with a man who seemed perfect. Charming. Handsome. Romantic. The room was dead silent. Even the servers had stopped moving. When I got pregnant with Zoe, I was the happiest I'd ever been, Mum continued. But then I discovered the truth. He didn't love me. He loved my money. And when I wouldn't give him control of my assets, he tried to have me killed. My hand flew to my mouth. Mum, I survived, she said, looking at me with so much love. But I realized my world was poisonous. Everyone wanted something from me. No one saw me as a person, just as a bank account. So I made a choice. I went into hiding, changed my name, built a new identity, and I raised my daughter away from all that toxicity. Tears were streaming down my face now. You lived poor because of me? I lived simply because I wanted to teach you what really mattered, Mom said. I wanted you to understand the value of hard work, to treat people with respect, regardless of their bank balance, to judge character instead of clothing. She looked directly at the Ashfords, to recognize cruelty when you saw it. Constance had gone pale. This is a trick, some kind of scam. Is it? Mom pulled out her phone and tapped the screen a few times. Check your email, Richard. Richard fumbled for his phone. His hands were shaking. When he looked at the screen, all the colour drained from his face. What is it? Constance demanded, grabbing the phone from him. She read whatever was there, and her knees actually buckled. She grabbed a chair to keep from falling. You see, Mom said calmly, I've been watching you for months. Ever since Zoe told me she was engaged to Trevor. I wanted to know what kind of family she was marrying into. I wanted to see if you would treat her with respect, if you would accept her for who she is, not what she has. She walked slowly toward Richard, and he actually backed up a step. I knew you worked in real estate, Richard. So I did some research. It turns out, Castellano Global Industries owns the development company where you're a senior partner. Have owned it for 15 years, in fact. You've been working for me this whole time. You just didn't know it. Richard's mouth opened and closed like a fish. No sound came out. That email I just sent you, Mum continued. It's your termination letter. Consider yourself fired. Effective immediately. You can't. Richard sputtered. I have contracts. I have rights. Read the fine print, Mum said coldly. There's a morality clause. I'd say publicly humiliating someone for being poor violates that pretty clearly, wouldn't you? A man in an expensive suit appeared from somewhere in the crowd. I'd never noticed him before, but now I realized he'd been sitting at one of the guest tables this whole time. He was young, maybe 35, with sharp eyes and an expensive watch. Mrs. Castellano, he said quietly, holding out a tablet. The documents you requested. Mum took the tablet and turned to Trevor. And you, Trevor, the investment fund you work for Whitmore Capital. Trevor's face went grey. How do you know where I work? Castellano Global is your firm's largest client, Mum said. We account for approximately 40% of your managed assets. That email your boss just received suggests we're very unhappy with one of his junior partners. I imagine he'll be calling you shortly. As if on cue, Trevor's phone started buzzing in his pocket. He pulled it out with shaking hands. When he saw the caller ID, he looked like he might throw up. Answer it, Mum said. Go ahead, Trevor answered, walking a few steps away. We could all hear him say, Yes, sir. Yes, I understand. But no, please, if I could just explain. His voice got smaller and more desperate with each word. He came back a minute later, his face white as paper. I'm fired. Good, Mum said simply. Constance finally found her voice. It came out as a screech. You can't do this. You can't just destroy people's lives because your feelings got hurt. Hurt feelings. Mum's voice went deadly quiet. You called me trash. You said I wasn't fit to be a grandmother. You treated my daughter like she was lucky to marry into your family. You humiliated her in front of 400 people. That was Richard. I didn't. You stood next to him and smiled, Mom interrupted. You took that microphone and talked about me like I was some charity case you'd graciously accepted. You changed the seating chart so I'd be hidden in a corner. You've spent months making little comments about my clothes, my hair, my education, my work. Did you think I didn't notice? Constance opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Mom turned back to me, and her face softened. I'm sorry I lied to you, sweetheart. I know this must be confusing and overwhelming, but everything I taught you was real. The love was real. The values were real. I wanted you to grow up knowing what actually matters in life. The cleaning jobs? I asked, my voice small. I was inspecting properties and facilities I own. The cafeteria work was me checking on employee conditions at my food service companies. Everything I did had a purpose. But the most important purpose was being your mother. She pulled me into a hug, and I started sobbing into her shoulder. My whole life had been a lie, but somehow it also felt more true than anything the Ashfords had ever shown me. Behind us, I heard Constance crying. Richard was on his phone, probably calling lawyers. Trevor stood frozen, still holding his silent phone like he couldn't believe what had just happened. Can we leave now? I whispered to my mum. Yes, she said. Let's go home. Our real home. Nina appeared next to us, grinning like she'd just won the lottery. I am so glad I became friends with you in college. This is the best day of my entire life. Despite everything, I laughed. It came out half sob, half giggle. As we walked toward the exit, Constance's voice rang out behind us. You'll regret this. We'll sue. We'll tell everyone what you did. You can't just... Mum turned back one last time. Do whatever you need to do, Constance. But I'd think carefully before you start telling people how I ruined your family by defending my daughter from your cruelty. The internet seems to disagree with you. Someone in the crowd held up their phone. It's already viral, they said. The video of Richard calling her trash, Trevor laughing. And then this, it's everywhere. Mom took my hand, and we walked out of that ballroom together, leaving behind my wedding dress, my marriage, and my old life. Everything had changed in one impossible moment, and somehow, I felt free for the first time in months. The car that picked us up wasn't the old sedan I'd grown up riding in. It was a black Mercedes with a driver who called my mother Mrs. Castellano and treated her like royalty. Nina sat across from us, still grinning. I sat next to my mum in my ruined wedding dress, mascara running down my face, trying to process what had just happened. "I don't understand," I said quietly as we drove through the city. "Why? Why live like we did? If you had all that money." Mum took my hand. "When your father tried to kill me, I realized something terrible. Every person in my life wanted something from me. Business partners wanted deals. Friends wanted investments. Even the man I loved only saw dollar signs. I was 24 years old, pregnant, and completely alone." She looked out the window at the city lights passing by. "So I disappeared. I created Diana Bennett. I rented that small apartment. I took jobs that let me watch you grow up. And I taught you everything I wish someone had taught me, that kindness matters more than money, that hard work builds character, that people's worth isn't measured by their bank accounts. But you let me think we were poor," I said. "I wore second-hand clothes. I worked part-time jobs in high school to help with rent. You let me struggle." "I know." Her voice cracked a little. "And there were times I almost told you. When you cried because you couldn't afford the school trip to Washington. When you worked double shifts to save for college textbooks. It killed me to watch you struggle. But I also saw you becoming someone extraordinary. Someone who didn't expect the world to be handed to her. Someone who treated the janitor at your school with the same respect as the principal." Nina spoke up. "For what it's worth, Zoe, you're the most genuine person I know. All those rich kids we went to college with, they were entitled and fake. You were real." "Nina's right," Mom said. "And when you told me about Trevor, I was hopeful at first. I thought maybe you'd found someone who loved you for you. But the more I met the Ashfords, the more I recognized them. They were exactly like the people from my old world, cruel, judgmental, obsessed with status." "You could have told me," I said. "You could have warned me. Would you have listened?" Mom asked gently. "You were in love. You thought if you just tried hard enough, they'd accept you. You needed to see for yourself who they really were." She was right. I wouldn't have believed her. I'd thought I could change them, that love would be enough. The car pulled up to a building I'd passed 1,000 times, but never really looked at a luxury high-rise in the nicest part of downtown. The doorman greeted Mum by name and welcomed her home. The penthouse took up the entire top floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. The furniture was elegant, but comfortable. There were bookshelves everywhere, and photographs I'd never seen before. Mum shaking hands with presidents, cutting ribbons at building openings, speaking at conferences. "This is where you really live?" I asked, spinning around slowly. "This is where we both live now," Mum said. "If you want to." Over the next few days, the story exploded. Someone's cell phone video from the wedding went viral. Millions of people watched Richard call my mother trash, watched Trevor laugh, watched me cancel the wedding. Then they watched my mother reveal who she really was. The internet lost its mind. People found every connection between Castellano Global Industries and the Ashfords. Richard's company tanked as clients fled. Trevor's firm released a statement saying they'd parted ways with him. Constance's charity boards asked her to step down after donors threatened to pull funding. The Ashfords tried to fight back. They gave interviews claiming Mum had trapped them, that it was all a setup. But the video evidence was clear they'd been cruel first. Mum had just defended herself and me. Trevor sent me hundreds of texts. He called constantly. He showed up at the penthouse, but security turned him away. His messages went from angry to desperate to pathetic. "I loved you," one text said. "You know I did. I just got caught up in the moment. Please, Zoe, we can fix this." But he'd laughed. That was the thing I couldn't get past. When his father called my mother trash, Trevor had laughed. A week after the wedding that never was, Mum sat me down in her home office, a beautiful room with a view of the entire city. "I need to tell you about the company," she said. "About what happens next." She explained that Castellano Global Industries was more than just a business. It was a legacy she'd built from nothing. She showed me financial reports, introduced me to key executives over video calls, walked me through decades of strategic decisions. "I'm not saying you have to take over," Mum said. "This is my dream. Not necessarily yours. But if you want to learn, if you want to be involved, there's a place for you here." I thought about my old job in marketing, my tiny cubicle, my boss who never learned my name right. I thought about all the times I'd felt small and powerless. "I want to learn," I said. So I did. Mum started teaching me about the business world, not the cutthroat, cruel version the Ashfords represented, but something better. She showed me how to use wealth to create opportunities for others. We visited factories where she'd implemented profit-sharing programs. We toured affordable housing developments her company had built. We met with scholarship recipients from the foundation she'd quietly funded for years. "Money is just a tool," Mum told me. "It can build up or tear down. The Ashfords use theirs to make themselves feel superior. We're going to use ours to actually help people." 3 months after the wedding, we launched something new, the Bennett Foundation, named after the identity Mum had lived under for 28 years. Its mission was to help single mothers go to college, to provide childcare and scholarships and support. "Everything I pretended to be," Mum said at the press conference. "Everything I lived through to raise my daughter, there are women out there actually living that reality. They need help. This is how we help them." Nina became my right hand in running the foundation's marketing and outreach. She quit her old job and dove in completely. "This is actual meaningful work," she said. "Not like selling energy drinks to teenagers." I started seeing someone new too. His name was Anthony, and he was a teacher at an inner-city school. He had student loans and drove a beat-up car, and had no idea who my mother was when we first met. When I eventually told him, he just shrugged and said, "That's cool, but can you help me grade these essays?" One evening, 6 months after everything happened, I was having dinner with Mum in the penthouse when my phone buzzed. It was a news alert. "Richard Ashford declares bankruptcy." I read aloud. "Trevor Ashford, working as junior analyst at small firm for a quarter of his old salary. Constance Ashford no longer appears on any charity boards." Mum looked up from her pasta. "How do you feel about that?" I thought about it. I waited to feel satisfaction or revenge or happiness, but mostly I just felt nothing. "I don't care," I realized. "They're not important to me anymore." Mum smiled. "That's when you know you've really moved on." A year after the wedding that never happened, I stood in that same cathedral where I'd almost married Trevor. But this time was different. This time, Anthony waited at the altar, in a simple suit. This time, Mum walked down the aisle with me, holding my arm, crying happy tears. This time, my side of the church was full people from the foundation. Mum's employees who'd become friends, my co-workers, people we'd helped over the past year. The reception was at a small restaurant Mum owned. Just 50 people who actually cared about us. No ice sculptures, no 5-course meals, no speeches about legacy and bloodlines. When it was time for toasts, Nina stood up with her champagne glass. "A year ago, I watched my best friend almost make the biggest mistake of her life," she said. "But then I watched her find the courage to walk away. And I watched her mother reveal one of the most incredible secrets I've ever heard." She raised her glass. "To Zoe and Diana, 2 of the strongest women I know. And to Anthony, for loving Zoe exactly as she is." We all drank. Anthony kissed me. Mum beamed from the front table. Later, when things had quieted down, Mum pulled me aside. "Are you happy?" she asked. I looked around at the small gathering of real friends. At my husband, who loved me, for me. At the foundation work that gave my life meaning. At my mother, who'd sacrificed everything to teach me what truly mattered. "I'm happy," I said. "Are you? Any regrets about how you raised me?" Mum pulled me into a hug. "Not a single one. You were always my greatest treasure, Zoe. Not the company, not the money. You. Just you." "I love you, Mum," I whispered. "I love you too, baby. More than you'll ever know." We stood there holding each other while the party continued around us. I thought about that horrible day a year ago when I'd thought my world was ending. But really, it had been the beginning of something so much better. The Ashfords had tried to make me feel worthless. They'd called my mother trash. They'd laughed at us. But we'd won. Not because Mum had money, though that helped. We'd won because we had something they never would. We had each other. We had love. We had integrity. And in the end, that was worth more than all the money in the world.